Hello everyone, Logan Hertz with Hazeltine LLC. This video will go under the classification of random thoughts, just random thoughts that I've had, and they're not necessarily relevant to the infinite banking concept specifically, but just some thoughts that I had that honestly probably don't apply to most of the people watching this channel, most of the people who have an interest and are exploring some of these alternative financial concepts. The thoughts I'm going to go over today really are addressed more to some of our critics. And sometimes I use this channel as a platform for responding to them. Although I'll be honest, I don't think it's very helpful for the audience. I think it's maybe more helpful for me as a form of catharsis because sometimes you may not be aware of how much abuse verbally and otherwise I take from lots of people who, for some reason, get extremely angry at the idea that we might be proposing some alternative financial concepts. And I think it's Stockholm syndrome on their part is what's going on when I start talking about these things. They don't want to admit how beholden they are to the financial powers that be. And so they just get angry and attack me rather than turning their anger on the people who are truly taking advantage of them. But that's more psychoanalysis than you probably asked for. And one of the things that a lot of these people will do, which again, I don't think this really applies to my audience. It applies maybe to not even all, but some of my critics, is they have this obsession with fees, which I don't really understand. Why are you obsessed with fees? You should be focused on the value. If I don't know what the value is that I'm getting, then the fees, the price is irrelevant. If you tell me something costs $50, that means nothing to me until I understand what is it that I'm actually buying. And then I can determine whether $50 is a reasonable price or not. So I've heard them talk about comparing whole life insurance to investments, which is what they always do, which is the wrong comparison. And then they obsess over how they can drive those fees down to zero. So you can apparently get some, I don't know, mutual funds, index funds, or whatever. Some of them are saying where you can drive the fees down to 0.05%, which is absurdly low. Can you do that? I don't know. I'm skeptical when I saw that. But even if you can, the whole point is okay, you're missing the whole point. Maybe you did drive the fees down to 0.05%. But whenever these people focus on numbers, they focus on one variable. And with the numbers, there's always an unstated assumption behind the numbers. And the assumption that they're making when we state it out loud is ridiculous. What they're saying is this: I can drive the fees down as much as possible and yet still get the same amount of value out of the product. That's what they're saying because they're obsessed with driving the fees down to zero. Okay, all things being equal, I would like to pay less in fees, but that's the problem. All things are never equal. You're saying I'm going to drive the fees all the way down to 0.05%, something absurdly low, but I'll still get the same value out of it. Well, in any walk of life, we know that's not the case. If you want to buy a Ferrari, it's going to cost more than a Honda Civic. That doesn't mean the Ferrari is a ripoff and the Civic is a good deal. Both are good. It just depends what you're looking for. But if you want a nicer car, you're going to have to pay a higher price. If you start driving the price down, the value you're getting also has to go down at some point. So that's the unstated assumption that they make. They look at one variable in isolation, in this case, the fees, and then obsess over trying to drive the fees down to zero. I don't care about the fees if I'm getting outsized value. They really should apply this to their own lives. So let's take this to its logical conclusion. Let's think about you're a business owner. By the way, our critics, I think, have probably never owned or run a business. They've never hired a full time employee or done things like that. I do have to say, I envy our critics because it seems to me they have sinecures where they don't have to do anything and they can just collect income because they don't seem to understand what it means to actually work for a living and earn income and how hard it can be, especially as a business owner, to actually earn that income. So they must be in positions where they're just in some sort of government job where they can just collect the paycheck, some sort of really easy W-2 job where they can sit back and do nothing and keep collecting income, which I wish I had that. That would be nice. I wish I had that luxury. I'll be honest, I do envy them a bit. And I think that's part of where their attitude comes from because they don't have any real world experience of things like starting a business, acquiring customers, hiring full-time employees, things like that. If they did, they might have a different mentality. They seem to think that income just grows on trees. So let's assume you're running a business and you have a guy and you're paying him $100,000 a year and he's amazing. And he's bringing in $5 million worth of revenue, right? He's amazing. You're paying him $100,000. He's bringing in $5 million of revenue per year. If we apply the same logic to that scenario that our critics use when they apply to financial products, we would say, hey, you know what? Instead of paying that guy 100,000, that's a high fee. Let's pay him 50,000. Let's cut his salary down as much as we possibly can because that's going to maximize how much income we're getting. And obviously that would be ridiculous. If I'm paying him 100,000 and I say, "Hey, we're going to cut your salary to 50,000." What's going to happen is not that I get more of that 5 million because I reduce my costs. No, what happens is that 5 million is going to go to zero because your good employee is now going to leave and go work for a competitor and take all your business with him. And so you're going to get nothing. That's the logical result of their obsession with fees. When I'm a business owner, I'm paying my employees. That's oftentimes the highest cost that I have as a business owner is paying my employees. So according to their logic, I should want to drive that cost down as far to zero as possible because that way I'll get more value. Of course, the ridiculous assumption they're making is I can underpay my employees and drive that cost down to zero, drive their paychecks as close to zero as possible, and yet I'll still get the same amount of value out of them, which is absurd, which is absurd. It also shows that they view everything as a commodity. It's just a commodity, it's just a product. There's no service involved, there's no strategy involved, there's no thinking, there's no philosophical framework. It's just purely a commodity. I'm just buying X investment and that's it. And since it's just a commodity and they're all the same, or I can judge which ones are good for myself, I don't need help, then I'm going to drive the cost down to zero. And of course, what this also shows is a dark view that they really have, because what they're really saying is, what our critics are really saying is, I place zero value on human beings. I place no value on human capital. You as the financial advisor, you as the life insurance agent, you as some kind of strategic partner. I view your labor with absolute contempt. I think you are worthless, and I think you should give me everything for free. And the only thing I place a value on is the particular product that might be associated with that strategy. Forget about the strategy, forget about the person. I only place a value on the mutual fund that I'm buying, the index fund that I'm buying. I place no value on human beings whatsoever. I view them with contempt. And if I have to pay them a dime, I get really angry and feel like I've been taken advantage of. Again, take that same mentality to your employers. By that logic, you are fleecing your employers. They're paying you $80,000, $100,000, $120,000. How dare you fleece your employer like that? You're just hunting a commission. You're just hunting a commission. Call it a salary, call it whatever you want. The fact of the matter is you're getting paid based on the value that you provide. And if you're at your current employer and you're being paid $80,000 a year, and another employer comes along and says, hey, we'll offer you $100,000 a year, you would say, hey, I'm going to leave my current employer and go to this other employer because they value my labor more highly. Does that make you greedy and selfish because you went to the employer who valued your labor higher? No, of course not. That just makes you a logical, rational human being. It's a business decision. This is a business relationship. I'm going to go where I'm treated best. To quote the nomad capitalist, I'm going to go where I'm treated best. And guess what? Financial advisors, insurance agents are just like everybody else. We're going to go where we get paid the most because that shows that's where we're valued the most. That might come from the insurance company. That might come from our customers. It always comes from our customers, at least indirectly. I'm going to go where I am valued the most. And people like this who have the scarcity mindset, they view human beings with contempt. They view my human labor with contempt and say, I'm not going to pay you a dime because you're worthless, because you're a human being. I'm only paying for the product. Forget about the human being who designed and implemented the product. Forget about them. It's all about the product. And anyone who's been in the business world knows how ridiculous that is. Just think about software. You'll have two different companies implementing the same piece of software. One of them says this software is horrible, it's a disaster, it's a waste of money. The other one says the software is amazing and it's solving all of our problems. What's the difference? The difference was this company just saw a product. Man, that's it. They bought the product, period. That's it. And it didn't work. This other company didn't buy a product. They bought a service, a strategy, and they paid more money because they didn't buy just the product. They bought consulting services, implementation services, training, process improvement, all of those things that go with it so that the product gets implemented correctly and implemented in a way that benefits that particular company and it's configured for their particular requirements. And they adjust their processes to better adopt that software, that product, and they get a real solution because they're not seeing just a commodity. They value highly the human capital that comes with it, the people who are going to help you implement that software and really make sure it works for you. And it's the same thing in the financial sector. If you view life insurance or investments or any financial product as just purely a commodity, you're missing the most important element of all, which is the human capital. It's not a what question. These people who have the scarcity mindset are only asking the what question. What am I buying? And let me get the lowest possible price. Wait a minute. Who, what, why, when, where, how? Who, what, why, when, where, how? What's the first question? Who? It's a who question. Like the book says, who, not how. Who is helping you implement these strategies? Who is holding you accountable? Who is reviewing your financial plan every year? Just the fact that you have an outside third party looking at your financial plan is a huge advantage because he's not emotionally attached to your situation. He'll have a different perspective and he's going to see things that you don't see, even if he's not a genius. He doesn't have to be a genius. Also, he's living and breathing and doing this all day long. You're not. You have your full time job, you have your business. That's what you're focused on. You don't have the time to be focused on your finances all the time. He does. So when you're looking at finances, it's primarily a who question. Who is the quarterback of your team? Now, obviously, you ultimately are the quarterback in the sense that you have to be the decision maker, but who is your strategic partner who's helping you? Any good business owner or investor knows you are investing most of all in human beings and human capital. If I'm buying a business as an investment, I'm not looking at the business so much as I'm looking at the people running that business. Are they good? Marin Katusa and Rick Rule and other very successful speculators talk about this all the time. They're not looking so much at the product, they're looking at the team. Who is the leadership of that company? Do I trust them? If it's good leadership, they're probably going to succeed. If it's poor leadership, I don't care how great their product is, they're probably going to find a way to mess it up. And that's what we see. Our critics only see a product and they project their own greedy, selfish attitude onto people like me. So when I propose a strategy that involves the sale of life insurance or any financial product, they immediately jump to the conclusion that I'm just trying to sell a product and chase a commission and that's it. And they're projecting their own selfish attitude. I would never assume that. If you have a different financial strategy, there are other financial strategies out there that I don't agree with. And I talk about why I don't agree with them. But I would never say those other financial strategies are there because those people want to make money and fleece their customers. No, I'll talk about what are the merits or demerits of that strategy for the customer. That's what ultimately matters. If I'm paying a high fee, which of course that's a relative term, but I'm getting exponentially higher value, well, what's the problem? What's the problem? It's actually the opposite. Instead of having the scarcity mindset, we should have the abundance mindset. Because guess what? Just like good employees are not cheap, good financial professionals are not cheap. A good financial professional can add a lot of value. He knows his value, and he's not going to waste his time with people who have the scarcity mindset. Just like good employees are not going to waste their time with a bad employer. If they're being underpaid, they'll eventually find their way to an employer who's going to pay them what they're worth. If you're getting paid 80,000, but you're really worth 150,000, that situation is not going to last very long. The employer might be getting a great deal for a little while, and then that guy will go and work for somebody else. And that employer probably will never get a great deal because if you're getting underpaid to that amount, how hard are you really going to work? Are you really going to put a lot into it? Probably not. You're probably not going to be motivated. It's the same thing here. You should want to pay high fees just the same way a business wants to pay their employees well, right? You should also want your financial professional to be well compensated. Good businesses do not view paying their employees as a cost. It's not a cost, it's an investment. It's an investment. If the only thing you can do as a business is attract and retain good talent, you are almost guaranteed to succeed. You are almost guaranteed to succeed. On the other hand, if you cannot consistently attract and retain good talent, you'll probably eventually fail, no matter how great your product is, no matter how great your positioning is. And the same thing applies in all sectors of life. If you pay your CPA $1,000 and he finds a way to save you $25,000 on your taxes, are you upset that you paid him $1,000? No, this is what good business is. It's creating win-win scenarios. So he saved you $25,000 on taxes and you paid him $1,000. So on net, you're ahead $24,000. So you're super happy. He's happy because he got paid $1,000 for his work and he knows what he's worth. Wealth is not a zero-sum game. That's the fundamental point that we're making here. Wealth is not a zero-sum game. There are value creators and there are value extractors. And our critics seem to have more the mentality of a value extractor. Somebody else goes out and creates the value. Somebody else is the entrepreneur who has the great idea, who gets the business going. And then they just come along and extract value from that person. They're hangers on. And so then they project their value extraction mindset onto other people. So when they see other people making money, they assume that they must have stolen it somehow, must have done some underhanded sales tactic. They must be greedy, instead of assuming is usually the case, which is they added a tremendous amount of value. It is not easy to make money in the marketplace, especially as a business owner or an entrepreneur. The failure rate is extremely high. If I was just chasing commission, as Ryan Griggs would say, I'd be selling pharmaceuticals. There's much easier ways to make money than life insurance. The failure rate among life insurance agents is 92%. 92% of life insurance agents fail within the first 3 years. It is one of the most maligned, spat upon professions out there. And unfortunately, I have to give our critics some credit and say there are reasons for that. There are definitely reasons why there's a negative perception. There are definitely insurance agents and financial advisors who are scummy and who are not the sort of people you want to work with. And unfortunately, that's what gives our business a bad reputation. So unfortunately, I have to acknowledge that reputation is deserved. But you shouldn't assume everyone is like that. Attorneys, oftentimes, there are negative connotations associated with lawyers, but there are really good attorneys out there who add a lot of value. In any line of business, there's going to be people who add a lot of value, and then they're going to be shysters. And that's true in every industry. Our industry is no different.